The sun-baked road unfurled like a discarded ribbon, its cracked surface shimmering under the relentless New Mexico heat. Cicadas thrummed a lazy anthem, and the brittle grass whispered secrets to the wind. Then, from the dust-choked horizon, they emerged, Sarah McCullough and her two daughters, their shadows stretching long and weary behind them. Sarah's dress, the color of forgotten coal, clung to her legs, its frayed sleeves telling stories of mended sorrows. She wasn't walking toward hope, just away from what broke her. The older girl, Ellie, clutched a rusted lunchbox adorned with daisies, her braids lopsided like a child's first attempt at tying knots. Little May trailed behind, dragging a faceless doll by its arm, its stitched smile a grotesque mockery of cheer. When the ghost town of Silver Bend appeared, a cluster of bleached bones masquerading as buildings, Sarah stopped. The church steeple's paint peeled like sunburnt skin, and the general store's porch sagged under the weight of neglect. "This is where we part ways," Sarah said, her voice sandpaper rough. Ellie's eyes hardened. "You never wanted a man," she shot back, "and we sure as hell don't need one." May, ever the quiet storm, perched a grasshopper on her collar like a jewel. Sarah's grip tightened on the tiny shoes in her hand, too small for her, too big for the past she couldn't outrun. The town greeted them with the kind of silence that sticks to your skin. A curtain twitched in the saloon, then stilled. The blacksmith's hammer clanged a lonely rhythm, and a dog slept belly up by the trough, too tired to care. As they passed the general store, a man named Harlan Graves leaned against a post, his hat low, his gaze sharper than a Bowie knife. His hands, scarred from both gunfights and cradle-rocking, rested easy on his belt. "Ain't no place for strays here," he drawled, though his eyes flicked to May's doll. Sarah met his stare. "We ain't staying," she said, and for the first time in years it sounded like a promise. Then the twist Harlan spat his toothpick into the dust and muttered, "Funny, neither am I." The words hung between them, a challenge or an offer, or neither could tell. And just like that, the wind kicked up, carrying the scent of rain from a storm that hadn't been on the horizon. Sarah's laugh, sudden and sharp as a whip crack, startled even herself. "Well," she said, adjusting her grip on those damn shoes, "guess we're all fools chasing the same ghost." The girls exchanged a glance. For the first time in miles, the road ahead didn't look so empty. Eleanor Hayes chalked another spelling word onto the blackboard, believe, with a force that snapped the nub in half. The children gasped. She forced a smile. "Whoops, guess even teachers make mistakes." Little Susie Parker piped up. "Ma says mistakes mean you're trying too hard at the wrong thing." Eleanor's laugh came out brittle, out of the mouths of babes. Outside, the wind kicked up dust devils along Main Street. Jesse Colton's face kept flickering behind her eyelids. Every time she blinked, those damnably blue eyes, the way his calluses had scraped against her wrist like a match strike. Ridiculous. She'd met his kind before, all charm and no roots like tumbleweeds with good teeth. Meanwhile, at the livery, Jesse was losing a battle with a stirrup strap and his own stubbornness. Old Sam spat tobacco juice into a tin can. "This ain't no quick fix, son. Gotta wait for the hide glue to cure." Jesse clenched his jaw. Every hour stranded here was another hour some bounty hunter might catch his trail. "Ain't you got a spare?" Sam chuckled. "Boy, this ain't St. Louis. We make do or do without." A commotion erupted outside, shouting the jangle of spurs. Jesse's hand went to his Colt before he recognized the voice. Eleanor. He peered through the hay-strewn window just in time to see her square off against two drunk ranch hands blocking the schoolhouse path. "Move!" she demanded, her voice sharper than a Bowie knife. One of the men leered. "Ain't you the feisty little schoolmarm?" Jesse was halfway out the door when Eleanor yanked a derringer from her boot. The metallic click froze everyone solid. "I said move," she repeated, sweet as arsenic pie. The drunks stumbled backward like spooked mustangs. Sam whistled low. "That your bread lady?" Jesse's mouth quirked. "Reckon she don't need savin'." But he was already striding toward her, the broken stirrup forgotten. Eleanor holstered her tiny gun and caught sight of him. Her spine stiffened. "Come to laugh at my enthusiasm again." "Come to buy you that replacement bread," he countered. A lie. He'd come because she was the first thing in years that made him want to stay and that terrified him more than any bounty. The school bell clanged. Eleanor hesitated, then tossed him a look over her shoulder. "Baker's closes at sundown, Mr. Colton. Best hurry." Jesse watched her go, the weight of his wanted poster burning a hole in his saddlebag. Somewhere west, a noose waited with his name on it. But right now, there was bread to buy. The world had turned to liquid chaos. Eleanor's boots sucked at the mud like the earth itself was trying to swallow her whole. Little Sarah's fingers were icy in her grip, but the girl didn't whimper, just squared her shoulders like she'd seen Eleanor do. God save fools and schoolteachers, Eleanor thought grimly as a lightning bolt split the sky, illuminating Jesse Colton up to his knees in the torrent-heaving sandbags like they were feather pillows. Then the scream cut through the rain. Higgins's wagon lurched sideways, one wheel dangling over the churning creek. The man's prized bolts of calico probably meant to impress Widow Thompson if Dry Creek's gossip mill was right, floated away like soggy ghosts. "My stock!" Higgins wailed, reaching for the unraveling fabric. The wagon groaned, sliding another inch toward oblivion. Jesse moved before anyone could blink. He vaulted onto the wagon bed, boots skidding on wet wood, and grabbed Higgins by his suspenders. "Your life, you damn fool!" he roared, yanking the man back just as the current snatched the wagon into the froth. It smashed against the bridge pilings with a crack like gunfire. Eleanor's breath caught. For a heartbeat, she and Jesse locked eyes across the madness, his blazing with something wild, hers wide with a realization this wasn't just some drifter. Drifters didn't risk their necks for calico and idiots. Sarah suddenly yanked free. "Paw!" She bolted toward the mill's foreman, who was slogging through the flood with arms outstretched. Eleanor lunged after her right into a sinkhole of mud. She went down hard, brown water closing over her head. The world muted to a gurgling rush. "So this is how it ends," she thought with absurd clarity, drowned in a creek wearing my second-best petticoat. A hand speared through the murk, hauling her up by the collar. Jesse's face, rain-slick and furious, filled her vision. "You got a death wish, schoolmarm," he snarled. Eleanor coughed up half the creek. "Just practicing, swimming," she wheezed. The laugh that burst from Jesse was half-crazed, bright as the lightning above them. He dragged her to higher ground where Sarah waded sobbing into her father's coat. The foreman gripped Jesse's arm. "Obliged, mister. That bridge is, gone." Jesse finished watching the last of it vanish under the foam. The mill's bell began tolling upstream, a frantic off-kilter clang. The dam must have burst. Eleanor's stomach dropped. The orphanage stood directly in the flood path. 20 children, one ancient building, and Sister Margaret, who'd once chased off a grizzly with her broom. Jesse read her face like a wanted poster. "How bad?" "Worse," Eleanor said, already wringing out her skirts. The rain chose that moment to slacken, as if the sky was catching its breath before the real punishment. Somewhere in the distance, the bell kept ringing. A dirge, a dare. Jesse spat out a curse, then shocked her by grinning. "Guess we're going swimming after all." He tossed her a rope from the sandbag pile. "Tie this round your waist, Hayes. I ain't fishing you out twice." The foreman gaped. "You two are crazy." "B. Established fact," Eleanor muttered, knotting the rope with shaking hands. Jesse's fingers brushed hers as he took the other end, his touch lingering just a heartbeat too long. Then the dam's roar shook the ground, and they ran toward it like the fools they were. The world held its breath. Eleanor's fingers curled into Jesse's soaked shirt like she could anchor him to this earth, to this moment, to her. He smelled of river mud and sweat and something stubbornly alive. Billy Carter's wails faded into the background as the townsfolk swarmed around them. Someone thrust a blanket at Jesse. Another pressed a flask into his hands. He took a swig and immediately choked. "Holy hell, that's Doc Henderson's medicinal whiskey." Eleanor finished swiping the flask. She knocked back a gulp, the burn searing away the last of her terror. "Tastes like turpentine and poor decisions." Jesse's laughter rang out loud and unguarded, and just like that, the spell broke. The crowd dispersed, hauling away the wreckage of Higgins' wagon, clucking over the damage. Only Widow Thompson lingered, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Mr. Colton," she said, tapping her cane, "you'll be wanting dry clothes. My late husband's things should fit you well enough." Jesse stiffened. "Ma'am, I couldn't—" "Nonsense. Heroics deserve hot stew and a borrowed shirt." The widow's gaze slid to Eleanor. "You'll bring him, won't you, dear, seeing as you're attached?" Eleanor jerked her hands away from Jesse like he'd caught fire. The widow's parlor smelled of mothballs and lavender. Jesse stood awkwardly in another man's clothes, the collar of the borrowed shirt chafing his neck. Through the window he watched Eleanor pace the garden, her skirt still damp, her hair escaping its pins in wild copper spirals. Stop staring like a love-struck calf, Widow Thompson said, thumping a bowl of stew before him. Eat. Then tell me why a man with a $500 bounty on his head risks his neck for a backwater town. The spoon froze halfway to Jesse's mouth. His pulse roared in his ears. The widow smirked. Oh, don't look so shocked. I take the Gazette for the crime blotter. That sketch they printed of you last month was downright insulting, made your nose look like a potato. Jesse set the spoon down carefully. You fixing to turn me in? Pish, Sheriff's got his hands full with the flood damage. She leaned in. But she doesn't know, does she? Outside, Eleanor bent to examine a rain-battered rosebush sunlight gilding the curve of her neck. Jesse's throat tightened. Some things, he said quietly, are worth more than $500. The garden gate squeaked as Eleanor finally entered. She took one look at Jesse's face and frowned. You two been talking about me. Nod, twee. Not a word, the widow said serenely, passing her a bowl. Just discussing how Mr. Colton here plans to fix my porch now that he's staying a while. Jesse choked on his stew. Eleanor's eyes widened. A slow grin spread across the widow's face as she vanished into the kitchen humming. The rosebush outside tapped against the window like a conspirator. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell began to ring, not in alarm this time, but in steady, stubborn rhythm. Like a heartbeat, like a beginning. The church bell tolled, shaking loose a pair of sparrows from the eaves. Eleanor smoothed her Sunday gloves twice before stepping inside. The pews were packed with townsfolk still buzzing about the flood, their whispers dying as Reverend Pike cleared his throat. She slipped into her usual spot up front, then immediately regretted it when the bench creaked loud enough to wake the dead. Halfway through the sermon on Jonah and the whale. Sometimes the Lord throws you overboard to save your sorry soul. A shadow filled the doorway. Jesse Colton hovered there like a man expecting to be struck by lightning, his borrowed suit straining across his shoulders. Every head swiveled. Widow Thompson smirked into her hymnal. Eleanor held her breath as he edged into the back pew, right next to old man Fletcher, who hadn't bathed since the Cleveland administration. Jesse's nose twitched, but he stayed put, gripping the pew in front of him like it might buck him off. Reverend Pike beamed. Well, seems we have a prodigal in our midst. Jesse's jaw worked. Just passing through preacher. Funny, Pike boomed. Jonah said the same thing. The congregation chuckled. Jesse looked ready to bolt. Then Billy Carter, bandaged but beaming, twisted around in his seat. Mister, you want to sit with us? His mother gasped, but Jesse's shoulders relaxed a fraction. He shook his head. I'm fine right here, partner. Eleanor didn't realize she'd been white-knuckling her Bible until the pages crinkled. Pike launched into a hymn, and the moment passed. Mostly. After the service, the churchyard erupted into a potluck chaos. Jesse got ambushed by a battalion of grateful mothers bearing pies. He stood there holding 3 stacked tins like they might explode, his eyes darting toward the road like a trapped animal. Eleanor intercepted him near the water pump. They'll have you married off by sundown if you keep making heroic rescues, she said, plucking a cherry pie from his teetering tower. Jesse snorted. Rather face that creek again. He hesitated, then jerked his chin toward the church. You, come here often. Every Sunday, unlike some heathens. She licked cherry syrup off her thumb. Jesse's gaze tracked the movement, then snapped away. A sudden commotion erupted by the road. Sheriff Tate and 2 dusty riders on lathered horses. The taller one, a gaunt man with a silver star, scanned the crowd before barking, Jesse Colton, you're under arrest for the robbery of the Santa Fe Express. The pie tin hit the dirt. Silence, then chaos. Women shrieked. Men reached for sidearms. Jesse went statue still, his face wiped clean of expression. Eleanor stepped forward. There's some mistake. No mistake, ma'am, the marshal said, not unkindly. Got eyewitnesses and a wanted poster with his likeness. He held up a wrinkled paper. The sketch was terrible. Jesse's nose did resemble a tuber, but the $500 bounty was legible enough. Jesse exhaled through his nose. Marshal, if I could... Billy Carter burst through the crowd, tiny fists swinging. You can't take him. He saved me. The marshal blinked down at the boy. Jesse gently caught Billy's collar. Easy, partner. Eleanor's pulse hammered in her throat. She met Jesse's eyes, really met them, and saw the truth there. Not guilt, not even fear, just weary resignation. The marshal coughed. Of course, if this hero business checks out, might be the judge will go easy. Jesse's fingers flexed. like he was weighing the feel of roots against the weight of chains. Then Widow Thompson's cane thwacked the marshal's boot. "Young man," she declared, "you'll stay for lunch before hauling anyone anywhere. I didn't slave over a ham for you to ruin the Lord's Day." The tension shattered. Even the marshal chuckled. As the crowd dispersed, Jesse leaned close to Eleanor, his breath warm against her ear. "Still think I'm worth staying for schoolmarm?" She stole his last pie tin and took a defiant bite. "Ask me again after the trial." Somewhere behind them the church bell rang, not in mourning, but in stubborn, reckless hope. The potluck tables groaned under the weight of casseroles and cobbler, but Eleanor only had eyes for the way Jesse Colton demolished his third slice of peach pie like a man who'd never tasted sugar before. "Slow down," she murmured, nudging the pitcher of sweet tea toward him. "Mrs. Wilkins will adopt you if you keep making those noises." Jesse froze mid-bite, a crumb clinging to his stubble. "That a threat or a promise?" His voice was gruff, but his eyes danced until Billy Carter barreled into his side, brandishing a slate. "Look, Mr. Colt, I drawed you savin' me." The crude sketch showed a stick figure, Jesse wrestling what appeared to be a giant squid. "Reckon that's about right," Jesse deadpanned, ruffling the boy's hair. Over Billy's head his gaze locked with Eleanor's. Something hot and sweet as the pie lodged in her throat. Then the universe intervened in the form of Widow Thompson's cane thumping between them. "Mr. Colton," she declared, "you're elected to fix my chicken coop. It's leaning like a drunkard after the flood." Jesse blinked. "Ma'am, excellent. Be there at dawn." The widow hobbled off, leaving Eleanor biting her lip to keep from laughing. Jesse leaned close, his whisper tickling her ear. "That woman terrifies me." Before Eleanor could reply, Sheriff Tate materialized beside them, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Colton, Marshal's telegraph came in." He held out a yellow slip. "Turns out the real Santa Fe Express robber got caught in Albuquerque. You're free to go." The air left Eleanor's lungs. Jesse stared at the paper like it might bite him. Billy tugged his sleeve. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" A muscle jumped in Jesse's jaw. He opened his mouth, then snapped it shut as the church bell began tolling wildly. A dust cloud rose on the road. Riders. 6 of them, their horses lathered, their faces shadowed by low-slung hats. The sheriff's hand went to his revolver. "The hell?" The lead rider reined up, his voice slicing through the sudden silence. "Looking for a Jesse Colton." His smile showed too many teeth. "Heard there's a bounty to collect." Jesse went still as a cornered wolf. Eleanor's pulse roared in her ears. These weren't lawmen. The rider's gaze landed on Jesse. "Well now, ain't this cozy?" He drew his Colt slow, like a snake uncoiling. "Boys, seems we found ourselves a hero." Eleanor's fingers found Jesse's sleeve. His arm was steel under her touch. Then Widow Thompson's voice cut through the tension like a cleaver. "Young man, you'll put that away before I box your ears." She marched forward, cane raised. "This is the Lord's Day, not some back alley brawl." The outlaw blinked. "Old woman, I'll—" Jesse moved. One moment he was beside Eleanor. The next, he'd yanked the man clean out of the saddle. The gun went flying. The other outlaws reached for their weapons, only to freeze as every townsfolk from the blacksmith to the choir ladies leveled shotguns from under the picnic tables. Sheriff Tate cocked his rifle. "Y'all picked the wrong damn potluck." The lead outlaw gaped at the sea of gun barrels. Jesse dusted off his hands. "Told you," he said to Eleanor deadpan. "Terrifying." As the sheriff hauled the cursing outlaws away, Billy tugged Jesse's sleeve again. "Does this mean you're staying now?" Jesse looked at Eleanor, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. The church bell chimed once more, clear and bright, over Dry Creek. "Reckon it does, partner." The quilt lay stretched between them like a map of all the broken things they'd dared to mend. Jesse held up his latest square, a lopsided star that looked more like a drunken sheriff's badge, and frowned. "This might be the ugliest thing in the territory." Eleanor snatched it from him, pressing it to her chest with exaggerated offense. "It's perfect. It's got character." "Deity character," Jesse drawled, leaning back in his chair until it creaked ominously. "That what we're calling crimes against sewing now?" A laugh bubbled up in Eleanor's throat, startling them both. The sound sent a firefly skittering away from the porch lantern. She hadn't laughed like that since before. Jesse's boot nudged hers under the table. "Tell me about this one." He pointed to a scrap of faded red flannel in the quilt's center. "That was James's favorite shirt," she said, running a finger along the frayed edge. "He wore it the day he taught me to shoot, claimed I'd scare the bullets straight with my aim." The memory should have hurt. Instead, it settled warm in her ribs. Jesse's knife flashed as he whittled a new quilting template from an old cigar box. My old man had a hat like that brown patch there, left it behind when he rode out. He said it casual, like he wasn't carving his ghosts into the night air between them. The cicadas held their breath. Then, crash! The screen door slammed open as Billy Carter tumbled onto the porch wide-eyed and breathless. "Miss Hayes' sheriff says come quick, they found gold in the creek." Jesse's knife stilled. Eleanor's thimble clattered to the floor. "Gold," Jesse repeated flatly. "Yes, sir, old man Jenkins was panning for catfish and saw it glittering." Billy danced from foot to foot. "Whole town's gone crazy. Mr. Higgins is selling shovels for $2 apiece." Jesse and Eleanor exchanged a look. Dry Creek was about to become the kind of place men killed over, again. Eleanor stood so fast her chair toppled. "Wake Reverend Pike. Tell him to ring the church bell emergency town meeting." As Billy sprinted away, she reached for Jesse's hand without thinking. His fingers laced through hers, calluses catching on her skin. "Think we can civilize a gold rush?" he asked, already reaching for his hat. Eleanor grabbed her derringer from the sewing basket. "I've tamed wilder things." Jesse's grin was all teeth as he pulled her toward the chaos. "That a fact, schoolmarm." Somewhere in the dark, the quilt fluttered like a surrender flag, but no one was surrendering tonight. The quilt became Eleanor's armor. She wore it draped over her shoulders when grading papers wrapped it around her legs during chilly evenings, and when no one was looking, pressed her face into its folds to breathe in the fading scent of saddle leather and reckless decisions. Dry Creek buzzed around her oblivious. The gold rush fizzled out within a week. Turns out old man Jenkins's nuggets were just pyrite from a traveling salesman's sample case. The bridge crew finished early, and Widow Thompson took to leaving freshly baked pies on Eleanor's porch with alarming frequency. Then the letter arrived. Eleanor nearly burned it unread. The elegant script on the envelope screamed big city lawyer until she noticed the smudged postmark Santa Fe. Her knife slit the seal with surgical precision. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a bank draft for $500. Miss Hayes. Enclosed, please find the reward money for the capture of Carl Red Moran, leader of the Santa Fe Express robbers. While Marshal Henderson's office cannot officially commend a civilian for assistance in this matter, your detailed description of the gang's tattoos, particularly the rattlesnake on Moran's left forearm, proved instrumental in their identification and arrest. Yours respectfully, Deputy U.S. Marshal Eli Dawson. Eleanor's knees hit the chair. That night on the porch, Jessie whittling templates while she'd rambled about James's old gang, how they'd all sported matching snake tattoos. Billy Carter's voice piped up from her doorway. "Miss Hayes, you okay? You're smiling like you had a whole pie." She folded the letter with deliberate calm. "Billy, how'd you like to earn a nickel running an errand?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Yes'm, Fetch me Sheriff Tate. Tell him." She glanced at the quilt at the lopsided star square Jessie had called a crime against sewing. Her mouth curved. "Tell him I've got a bounty to collect." 2 weeks later, the stagecoach rolled into Dry Creek in a cloud of red dust. Eleanor watched from the schoolhouse steps, her fingers tight around the bank draft in her pocket. The door swung open, and out stepped a woman in a travel-worn dress, clutching a toddler. Then Jesse Colton emerged, hatless, his arm in a sling, scanning the crowd like a man searching for water in the desert. Eleanor didn't run. She walked slow, measured steps that gave him plenty of time to see the quilt draped over her arm, the $500 draft pinned to it like a badge. Jesse's breath hitched. "Eleanor, I can explain. You left to track James's killers." Her voice didn't shake. "Using my information, without telling me." He flinched. "I owed you that much." The toddler, a girl with Jesse's stubborn chin, wriggled free and barreled toward Eleanor, clutching a crumpled wanted poster. "Auntie Lenore, look at Uncle Jesse drawed you." The sketch showed Eleanor mid-derringer draw her hair, flying captioned, "Wanted for stealing my damn heart." Jesse rubbed his neck. "Kid's got a loose interpretation of—" Eleanor kissed him. Right there in front of God, the sheriff, and Widow Thompson's gleeful cackle. When she pulled back, Jesse's ears were gloriously red. "Took you long enough," she muttered, pressing the bank draft into his palm. "Now buy yourself a decent hat. You look ridiculous." Behind them, the church bell rang, not for sorrow, not for warning, but for the sheer joy of being heard at last. The sycamore leaves whispered secrets above them as Eleanor's fingers closed around the fabric scrap, now frayed and sun-bleached from weeks in Jesse's pocket. She should have been angry. should have thrown it in his face and marched inside. Instead, she found herself tracing the stitching with her thumb right where Jesse's clumsy needlework had left a tiny bloodstain that first night. "Strong hands, huh?" She arched an eyebrow at his bandaged forearm peeking from his sleeve. "That why you came back half-sewn yourself?" Jesse's mouth quirked. "Got into a disagreement with a cactus." "Mm-hmm." Eleanor stepped closer, close enough to see the sunburn peeling his nose, the new scar along his jawline. "And the other 20 miles, his grin faded. "Spent those realizing I'd rather be your problem than my own solution." A chicken pecked at Jesse's discarded hat. Somewhere down the lane, Widow Thompson's screen door creaked. No doubt the old bat had her opera glasses trained on them. Eleanor opened her mouth to say something scathing, something safe. Then Jesse pulled a harmonica from his back pocket. Eleanor blinked. "You don't play. Learn it." He wiped it on his shirt with exaggerated care. "Figured if I'm going to court the schoolmarm proper, I ought to—" The harmonica hit the dirt as Eleanor yanked him up by his collar. Their mouths crashed together with enough force to knock his bad arm against the porch rail. Jesse hissed, then laughed against her lips, his good hand cradling the back of her head like she was something precious. Billy Carter's gleeful whoop echoed from the schoolhouse window. "My teacher's kissing the cowboy." Jesse broke away, pressing his forehead to hers. "That gonna cost me my reputation." Eleanor stole his hat from the chicken and plopped it on her own head. "Mister, you just became a cautionary tale." Behind them, the quilt fluttered from the bedroom window like a flag claiming new territory. The wind carried the scent of baking bread from the Wilkins place, of fresh-cut lumber from the bridge of the wild sage Jesse had brought back in his pores. Dry Creek went about its business hammers, ringing children, giggling, pies cooling on windowsills. But under the sycamore roots sank deeper.